The House to come to order. Members will be at their seats. The clerk has opened the roll. You may record your presence. Please rise and give your attention to our House chaplain and remain standing for Pledge of Allegiance, led by Representative Hsu.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we thank you for this new day. Remind each of us today that you are our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. No matter the tasks which lie ahead, we can trust you to equip and empower us to complete them. All we need to do is to be still and know that you are God, to relax and cease from our own efforts and allow you to be who you can be. This gives us hope to endure, because when all is said and done, you will be exalted and your people will be cared for correctly and rightly. In Christ's name I pray, amen.
Have all members had the opportunity to record their presence? The clerk will close the roll and take the attendance. Introductions of bills and concurrent resolutions, the clerk will read.
Did you say the clerk will read? House Bill number 2449 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning governmental response to public health, relating to the state of disaster emergency powers of the governor and certain public officials, providing for certain limitations and restrictions, prohibiting stay-at-home orders and curfews, requirement of vaccinations by certain public and private entities, requiring the Capitol and legislative meetings to be open to the public, protecting the freedom of worship and operation of private business. House Bill number 2450 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning gaming, authorizing the Kansas Lottery to offer sports wagering with an existing contract provider, issue a request for proposal for an interactive sports wagering platform provider, report to the legislature.
Messages from the governor, the clerk will read.
Message to the Kansas House of Representatives, closed herewith is Executive Order 2108 for your information concerning establishing the Advantage Kansas Coordinating Council.
Messages from the Senate, the clerk will read.
Announcing passage of House Bills 2008, 2014, 2321. Senate adopts a Conference Committee report on House Bill 2022.
Speaker recognizes the Majority Leader for a motion to accede.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate did not concur in the House amendments to House substitute for Senate Bill 26. I move the House accede to the request of the Senate and that a conference committee be appointed.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The motion passes. As conferees as part of the House, the chair appoints Representative Prael, Dupperdang, and Helgerson. Speaker recognizes the Majority Leader for a motion to accede.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate did not concur in the House amendments to House substitute for Senate Bill 63. I move the House accede to the request of the Senate and that a conference committee be appointed.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. As conferees as part of the House appoints Representative Williams, Hoffman, and Wynn. Majority Leader to a motion to accede.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate did not concur in House amendments to Senate Bill 67. I move the House accede to the request of the Senate and that a conference committee be appointed.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. As conferees as part of the House, the chair appoints Representative Prael, Depperdang, and Helgerson. Speaker recognizes Majority Leader to motion to accede.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate did not concur in the House amendments to Senate Bill 95. I move the House accede to the request of the Senate and that a conference committee be appointed.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. As conferees as part of the House, the chair appoints Representative Prael, Depperdang, and Helgerson. Speaker recognizes the Majority Leader for a motion to accede.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate did not concur in House amendments to House substitute for Senate Bill 99. I move the House accede to the request of the Senate and that a conference committee be appointed.
For the motion, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. As conferees as part of the House, the chair appoints Representative Prael, Depperdang, and Helgerson. Senate Bill 64 appears on the consent calendar for the third day. Is there objection? Seeing none, it will be advanced to final action. Final action, the clerk will read.
Senate Bill number 64 by the Committee on Education, an act concerning post-secondary education relating to the regulation of private and out-of-state educational institutions by the State Board of Regents, certificates of approval, student protections, rules, and regulation.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 64. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Francis votes aye. Any further changes? With 120 voted in favor and 2 against the passage of Senate Bill 64, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2329 by the Committee on Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications, an act concerning pipeline safety relating to the State Corporation Commission, pipeline safety program, entities who are subject to the program.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2329. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Bishop votes aye. Representative Samsel votes aye. With 120 voted in favor and 1 against the passage of House Bill 2329, the same had received a constitutional majority. The bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2406 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning alcoholic liquor, restricted hours and days of sales, authorizing issuance of cereal malt beverage retailers' licenses to producers, sale in retail liquor stores relating to the sale of cereal malt beverage in the original package.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2406. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Representative Highland on explanation of vote.
Mr. Speaker, I vote no on House Bill 2406 for the following reason. The 4 Ps. P, poor prior planning. Representative Highland.
Representative Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not opposed of someone drinking if they choose to stay on their side of the road and conduct themselves in a reasonable fashion. But I do believe that the state has gone too far for opening up alcohol sales and encouraging consumption as early as 9 in the morning on Sundays. I'm amazed that enough is not enough when it comes to expanding gambling, drugs, alcohol, and sexual deviancies in this state. I hope there will be a day when we will all say enough is enough before it's too late. Mr. Speaker, I vote no on HB 2406.
Representative Johnson. Tim Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Out of respect for our religious institutions, it's always been no alcohol on Sunday morning, and I will vote no for that reason. If you need the alcohol, come see me at church. We have sacramental wine on Sundays. Thank you.
Any other further explanations of vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Lonnie Clark votes no. Representative Estes for next votes votes no. Representative Wagner votes no. Are we finished with the whistling? Any other changes of votes? With 80 voted in favor and 42 against the passage of House Bill 2406, the same have received a constitutional majority. The bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Concurrent Resolution 5015 by Representative Carpenter, a concurrent resolution urging the United States Congress to reject legislation to federalize election in the United States of America and oppose the For the People Act of 2021.
This constitutes final action on HCR 5015. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Representative Coleman votes no. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Representative Estes.
Mr. Speaker, while there are portions of H.R. 1 that I support, I vote today for HCR 5015 because I strongly oppose the nationalization of elections. I cite unintended consequences of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 as an example. NVRA, commonly referred to as motor voter, made it easier for citizens to register to vote, which was very beneficial. However, it also added an extended waiting period to remove inactive voters from the rolls. This makes it harder for states to remove people from the rolls who have moved. I encounter parents who say their children have grown and moved away, sometimes even out of states. I encounter homeowners who report that they have owned their homes for many years and they still receive election-related mail for the previous owners.
Representative Sawyer.
Mr. Speaker, I vote no on House Concurrent Resolution 5015. Voting is our civic duty and one of the most important rights and responsibilities that we have as American citizens. There is nothing more tedious about protecting voter rights. This resolution is nothing more than a political move that supports disenfranchising and suppressing voters, allowing for partisan gerrymandering and loose ethic laws. The legislature should be working to ensure everyone has the ability to vote rather than focus on these partisan political games. Condemning the Voting Acts of 1965 made it unfortunately clear that this body would rather move backwards than forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representatives Neighbor, Woodard, Hoy, Featherston, Gartner, Curtis, Ruiz, Day, Byers, Victors, Bishop, Reese, Burrows, Stogsdale, Alcala, Finney, Amix.
Representative Eric Smith.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday I sat and listened, mostly quietly, to the hypocrisy and deliberate indifference to what we know to be fact. After watching a political gang relentlessly attack a president for 4 years, trying to find some way to connect him to election tampering, overnight they declare no election fraud when they get their candidate elected with record numbers. After watching 2 blatantly failed impeachments by the same political gang, it should not surprise anyone we are more than a little gun-shy to let that same mob mentality fundamentally change our election processes and take even more power from the states. I voted in favor of HCR 5015.
Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I vote no on HCR 5015. I hate to tell the members, but H.R. 1 has already passed the Congress. And so we spent hours in tedious debate yesterday for nothing, while Medicaid expansion lies fallow in the dirt in our chamber, while hundreds of thousands of Kansans go without health care and billions of dollars are not received by our state. I therefore vote no on HCR 5015. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Life is good today. The For the People Act is a bill in the United States Congress to expand voting rights, change campaign finance laws to reduce the influence of money in politics, limit partisan gerrymandering, and create new ethics rules for federal office holders. Since the founding of our country, some of us were considered lesser than others, 3/5 of a person. Since the ratification of the 15th Amendment in 1870, voter suppression has permeated parts of our country in the name of states' rights. I support all efforts to overcome these impediments to voting and vote no on HCR 5015. And Mr. Speaker, the T in T-bone is not for tedious, it is for the truth.
Any further explanation of vote? Representative Samsel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will not be tedious. I prayed about this. It's not perfect. There are good things and bad things in it, but this is progress. It's not perfection. It doesn't deserve 100% support from either party, but since that's how it looked, I'm not going to switch my vote unless a Democrat does to do a show of bipartisanship. I won't get George Washington trending today, but downstairs in the basement, the Kansas Constitution says all political power is inherent in the people. I objected through KEMA. When the LCC consolidated, I object to the federal government doing it now, which is a great overreach. Thank you.
Any further explanation? Seeing none, does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 84 voted in favor and 38 against, the passage of HCR 5015, the same have received a constitutional majority. The bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
Senate Bill 24 by the Committee on Utilities, an act concerning municipalities, prohibiting any requirements that impact a customer's use of energy, relating to the retail provision of natural gas and propane, creating the Kansas Energy Choice Act.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 24. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Representative Estes, did you desire to explain? Or the button left on from last time? Okay. Anybody desire to change his or her vote? Representative Susan Ruiz votes no. Representative Bobbleson votes no. Representative Byers votes no. Further changes? 93 voted in favor, 29 against the passage of Senate Bill 24. The same have received a constitutional majority. The bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
Senate Bill 36 by the Committee on Transportation, an act concerning motor vehicles, relating to salvage vehicles, requiring the Kansas Highway Patrol to make multiple vehicle checks within a set time period upon application by a salvage vehicle pool, allowing salvage vehicle pools and salvage vehicle dealers to apply to the Division of Vehicles for ownership documents, providing application and notice requirements therefor.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 36. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Penn votes aye. Representative Rajas votes aye. Any further changes? With 116 in favor and 6 against the passage of Senate Bill 36, the same have received a constitutional majority. The bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
Senate Bill 55 by the Committee on Education, an act concerning the healing arts, relating to healing arts schools, professional services performed thereby, authorization thereof.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 55. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 122 voted in favor and 0 against the passage of Senate Bill 55, the same that received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
Senate Bill number 86 by the Committee on Pensions, Investments, and Benefits, an act concerning retirement and pensions relating to the Kansas Public Employees Retirement System and retirement systems thereunder, conforming certain CAPERS provisions with the Federal CARES Act.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 86. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had that opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 122 voted in favor and 0 against the passage of Senate Bill 86, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Chair recognizes the majority leader for motion to resolve into the committee of the whole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House resolve itself into the committee of the whole for the purpose of considering those items under the heading of general orders.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion carries. The chair appoints Representative Waymaster as the chair of the committee of the whole.
Good morning. The first item of business is Senate Bill 107. For the purpose of carrying Senate Bill 107, the chair recognizes Representative Patton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were committee amendments. I move adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The motion passes and the committee report is adopted. You may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate Bill 107 would enact the Uniform Fiduciary Income and Principal Act while repealing our old Uniform Principal and Income Act from 1997. This is the product of both the Uniform Law Commission and the Judicial Council Probate Committee. These updates are needed to adapt to changes in the design and use of trust over time, including the expansion of the use of the power to adjust between income and principal, the addition of provisions for unit trusts, and simplifying changes to clarify which states' laws govern the trust. This is a very specific area of the law that very few attorneys practice in. The committee was extremely thankful to have the Judicial Council Probate Committee work on this. I have the honor of serving on that committee, and we meet about once a month throughout the year and working on these types of things. And I can attest to the fact that this is a really good group, smart attorneys that get together and work on this. They went through this bill line by line, selecting what provisions from the uniform law we should enact in Kansas, and if there were any tweaks, they spent a lot of time working on that. And so this is a good product. We passed it last year 125 to 0, and then it did not make it through both chambers because we adjourned early. So it's a good bill. I would encourage your support and stand for any questions.
Is there further discussion on Senate Bill 107? The chair recognizes Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would the chairman stand for 2 questions?
I would be happy to do so.
First, Mr. Chairman, can you tell us how many sections there are in this valuable legislation?
$51. 51. This was tedious work.
And how many pages did it take to accomplish this good work?
37.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Well, thank you.
And now, with respect to the other Mr. Chair behind me, at the risk of being boring, monotonous, dull, deadly dull, uninteresting, unexciting, unvaried, unvarying, lacking variety, mind-numbing, mindless, soul-destroying, soulless, humdrum, dreary, ho-hum, or mundane, but never tedious, I tell you this is good legislation, and I urge your affirmative vote on Senate Bill 107. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there any other members that wish to speak for Senate Bill 107? Seeing no further discussion, Representative Patton, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that when the committee rises and it reports Senate Bill 107 favorably for passage.
Committee, you've heard the motion by Representative Patton to report Senate Bill 107 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Motion passes. The next item for business is Senate Bill 175. For the purposes of carrying Senate Bill 175, the chair recognizes Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And there were committee amendments. I move the adoption of the committee report.
Committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes and the committee report is adopted. Chairman, you may continue.
Thank you. And this particular bill that we're dealing with, a new rural emergency hospital and a funding mechanism to help a community get it in place. I'm really pleased that I get to carry this bill today because the community I live in would have been a poster child for being able to use this bill when our hospital closed in 2015. This particular bill sets up this new rural emergency hospital. It's a federal legislation that was signed in December. It'll become effective, not immediately, but it will become effective down the line as rules and regulations, and we need to pass this bill to be able to take advantage of it. And a new rural emergency hospital under this legislation would allow a regular hospital or a critical access hospital to convert to a rural emergency hospital, which operates 24/7 emergency care, preventive care and primary care, and chronic disease management. And then anything beyond that, there are some holding beds that would allow then transfer to a larger institution with more services, or to a critical or to a trauma level 1 or 2. These hospitals will have to have an agreement in place to be able to do that. The accompanying part of this legislation was something that was put together that is a grant opportunity for communities to investigate whether they want to transfer their hospital to the rural emergency hospital. It's the innovation grant. It makes $10 million total available over a maximum of 5 years, and a community that wants to utilize it, if they put in $2, they'll get $1 in grant. So they put in more than what the grant puts in. The question would be, is this a viable service for rural communities to do? And my community would be an example. It's not a rural emergency hospital, but it looks just like it. And we have, through Labette Health and Parsons, we're about 30 miles away, they put in a 24/7 emergency care, preventative care, and primary care clinic, the disease management, plus they do the normal tests, the blood test, an MRI, a CT scan, those type of things, and then they move them if necessary. We have, I think, 3 holding beds that if they can hold someone overnight, and if it looks like they need to be moved, they move them out. And 75% of the patients that present, this model works for perfectly. They don't need the emergency room. They can come in through the clinic. So my community, this opened in about 2017, has proved that this model will work. The only thing that we don't have is the ability that this bill grants that if you decide to go this way and the community is involved in the decision and it's not working, you can go back to a critical access hospital or a regular hospital. So you're not locked into your move. The reimbursement in the legislation makes the payment to a rural emergency hospital the same for the covered services as a regular hospital or a critical access hospital. So these two measures put together make a tremendous tool for the communities, probably 30 plus now with hospitals that struggle because of lack of beds utilized, lack of inpatient business, and other options out there with clinics, makes it viable for a community to keep this type of facility. I wish we had it at the time and we would not have had to start over. But what we ended up with is proof to me that this will work, and it'll prevent some communities in Kansas from going through some of the terrible times that we did with no health care option until we found someone a couple years later that made it work. So I think I'll stop there and take questions that anyone has regarding this legislation. Like I said, it just puts us in position to do this when the program is opened up on the federal level.
Does any member desire to speak to the bill? The chair recognizes Representative Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The carrier of the bill did an excellent job describing this legislation, including both important parts of it. I support this. I would urge you to do the same. We've heard a lot of talk about supporting our rural hospitals. There is other legislation out there that I believe would do a great deal of good for our rural hospitals as well. Some of the objections to that has been finding a sustainable, right-size model for these rural hospitals moving forward. I believe this legislation helps put those rural hospitals in a sustainable place. It's my sincere hope that with the passage of this legislation, we might be allowed to have the next debate, which is what are the ways beyond this which we can support rural hospitals and the Kansans who might be eligible for Medicaid under an expanded practice. I think this is good practice. The federal government has laid out a model so that we can make sure that our hospitals fall under their recent legislation, and I believe we should do the same when it comes to expanding the eligibility of Medicaid. Notwithstanding not having done that yet, I do support this legislation and urge you to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The chair recognizes Representative Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to express my support of this bill. As the carrier mentioned, in his community, there is a hospital, and also near my district in Fort Scott, there's a hospital that is operating very similarly to what this will allow. And it seems to be working very well there. And a year ago, I asked a representative from the Kansas Hospital Association how this would compare to Fort Scott and Independence, and he said as far as the patient goes, it'd be very similar to what's happening now. And both those communities, it's working well for all that I can see, so I can see where it would be helpful in other communities as well. Thank you.
The chair recognizes Representative Adam Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to belabor the point, but as a representative that represents 6 different counties out in northwest Kansas, I have at least one, possibly more hospitals that are looking at this as a method for continuing to serve their communities out there. This is a good bill, and I would encourage your support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion on Senate Bill 175? Seeing none, Representative Kelly, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and appreciate one thing I didn't mention that I think we should be proud of is that the Kansas Hospital Association since 2012 has been working to develop this model, and I believe a lot of what went in this model came out of Kansas and the work done by the Kansas Hospital Association. And I also appreciate the House amendment on this bill that provides the grant opportunity to the communities. So, Mr. Chair, when House rises and reports, I move that they report Senate Bill 175 favorable for passage.
Committee, you heard the motion by Representative Kelly to report Senate Bill 175 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. The next item of business that we have is House Bill 2150, and for the purpose of carrying House Bill 2150, the chair recognizes Representative Wagoner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There were committee amendments, and I move adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes, and the committee report is adopted. You may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2150 was requested by the Department of Children and Families in a move to update Adult Protective Services law. These changes would help modernize APS practices, improve agency definitions, and support comprehensive adult protective services investigations. This new bill is very similar to House Bill 2700, which was requested by DCF in the 2020 session. This bill amends KSA 39-1430 to 1433. It makes three major changes to current law. For one, the term of fiduciary abuse and exploitation are now refined in the term financial exploitation. This new term is used by virtually every other state and by our federally supported partners. Updating our terminology will provide consistency in case assignments and avoid confusion when investigations are made of dependent adults who are possibly being financially exploited by caregivers or others. The second change is in Section 2, where an updated list is provided of required reporters of dependent adult abuse, neglect, and now financial exploitation. It adds persons in postgraduate training approved by the Board of Healing Arts, as well as persons licensed by the Board of Examiners in Optometry, school administrators, firefighters, and court service officers. These additional items are merely taken from the current list of mandatory reporters in other abuse reporting statutes. The third major change is in Section 3 of the bill that gives DCF up to 60 days to complete an investigation of cases involving financial exploitation. Any abuse or neglect allegations must still be investigated in 30 days, but financial cases involve obtaining financial records, which is a more time-consuming process and thus needs the longer lead time. This third section also requires the Secretary of the Department of Children and Families to forward any substantiated findings of abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation to the appropriate state regulatory authority if the abuse was committed by a licensed service provider. Further, in committee, this notification requirement was amended at the request of Leading Age Kansas to mandate that DCF also notify the officers of nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and residential health care homes plus home plus agencies if there were indeed a substantiated finding of resident abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation at their respective facilities. This bill passed as amended out of Children and Seniors Committee unanimously, and then after turnaround was passed out of Judiciary. The bill had 4 proponents testifying, 1 neutral, and no opponent testimony. The fiscal note shows no fiscal effect on the state of Kansas. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I am open for questions.
For discussion on House Bill 2150, the chair recognizes Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of HB 2150. This is important legislation, and at the risk of being wearisome, wearying, tiresome, soporific, dry as dust, arid, lifeless, colorless, monochrome, uninspired, or uninspiring, but never tedious, I urge your affirmative vote on HB 2150. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The chair recognizes Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering if the carrier would stand for a couple questions.
Gladly.
It's true that you're not a freshman, is this correct?
I'm a sophomore. Yes.
Sophomore, yes. We won't go into the definition of a sophomore. But yet, somehow, strangely, this is your first bill carry. Am I to understand that?
Yes, I was the forgotten middle child.
Well, I'm not going to haze you. I think that would be totally inappropriate, but I did want to let the body know that your first bill carry, and I think you've done a tremendous job. Thank you.
Any further discussion on House Bill 2150? Seeing none, Representative Wagoner, you may close.
The protection of dependent adults is a core state function. The proper investigation of any abuse allegations of those in senior congregate living or otherwise dependent upon others needs to be handled thoroughly, with speed, and with proper notification of results. By redefining financial exploitation and updating the investigatory process of DCF, we are fulfilling our protective obligations to the citizens of Kansas. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee rises and reports, that we report House Bill 2150 as amended favorably for passage.
Committee, you've heard the motion by Representative Wagoner to report House Bill 2150 favorably. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. The next item of business that we have is Senate Bill 238. For the purpose of carrying Senate Bill 238, the chair recognizes Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were committee amendments. I move the adoption of the committee report.
Committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes and the committee report is adopted. Representative Lynn, you may continue.
Thank you. All right, Senate Bill 238 has three main sections. First, this bill contains HB 2208, which we have already heard and passed in the House 124-0. As a refresher, that bill authorized licensed out-of-state physicians with telemedicine waivers within their scope of practice to practice telemedicine in Kansas. Second part, also part of HB 2208 and again passed 124-0, would amend the authority of the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board and would modify licensure and temporary permit requirements of professional counselors, social workers, marriage and family therapists, addiction counselors, psychologists, and master's level psychologists. These changes and requirements will reduce barriers to our mental health workforce and allow us to compete with neighboring states for these essential workers. Finally, it would establish certification for the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinics, which are known as CCBHCs, for any community mental health center, CMHCs, licensed by KDADS that provides for a specific list of services. This was a bipartisan recommendation made by the 2020 Special Committee on Mental Health Modernization and Reform that met this past fall, which included legislators and a variety of mental health professionals, and was made possible by the Excellence in Mental Health Act, which also had bipartisan support at the federal level and had bipartisan support in our House Health and Human Services Committee. On your desk, you will find CCBHC outcomes from neighboring states, as well as a map of CCBHCs currently operating. CCBHCs have outstanding measurable outcomes in our neighboring states, which include reducing ER visits, hospitalizations, increased access to care, including to veterans. Oklahoma found a net savings of over $2 million in 2020 when comparing the CCBHC model to the CMHC model, which is what we currently have here in Kansas, primarily through a reduction in crisis intervention and psychiatric inpatient hospital claims. By Oklahoma's third year of implementation, Oklahoma had added 981 new jobs to the healthcare workforce sector with an economic impact of almost $35 million annually. The CCBHC model will be able to contribute to job growth while stimulating the local economies here in Kansas. It will retain our healthcare workforce in Kansas instead of losing them to our neighboring states, which is what we're seeing in an alarming fashion. With that, I'll stand for questions.
All right, does any member desire to speak to Senate Bill 238? The chair recognizes Representative Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My compliments to the carrier of the bill. There's a lot that went into this, and she did an excellent job explaining it. I won't belabor the couple of pieces that we've already passed, but I do think the new language in here regarding CCBHCs is significant. This is one of the best things that we can do for mental health services in Kansas. I'm happy to support it. I also want to compliment our Medicaid director, the proponents of this bill, the chair of our committee. A lot of work went into getting this into the version that it is today to accommodate some concerns over the fiscal note and the impact to the budget neutrality provisions of our CMS waiver. I think this was a good process, and I'm grateful for all involved for working together to get us the legislation we have today. I would urge your support. Thank you.
The chair recognizes Representative Probst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to apologize in advance to the body because I'm going to take a slight detour on this discussion. I like this bill. I'm going to vote for it. But I don't want to let this moment go by without making a point. This is the second bill today that touches Medicaid. But the bill's been carefully edited to ensure that any germanous challenge wouldn't get attached. Every day when I leave this building, I walk by a sign that's got a picture of Abraham Lincoln, and it says, "Allow all the governed an equal voice in the government, and that, and only that, is self-government." My first year up here, I was on a panel on transparency where the former Senate president said, "We don't bottle up good ideas. In fact, good ideas rise to the top." And yesterday, I was told that we don't mind debate. We enjoy and welcome debate. But on this issue, we can't even have authentic discussion on it. We can't have a bill come up above the line that touches this issue for fear of an authentic debate. We have for years evaded our responsibility to have this discussion. And as a consequence, we've bottled up a number of necessary bills. I'm glad that some of these bills are coming up. This one and the one we previously discussed are much needed. But our fear of having this debate on this topic that would help Kansans, and by the way, I have small businesses in my district who can't keep employees because they can't afford health coverage. And they want this. They're business owners who want this. And despite what I assume would be the opponent's overwhelming majority status in this body, we fear having the debate, and it is chronically disappointing.
The chair recognizes Representative Landwehr. The chair recognizes Representative Samsel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to commend the carrier of this bill. She has worked tremendously. Her passion for mental health has been wonderful. It's going to do wonderful things for Kansas. I will not be tedious here again, but I just wanted to share that yesterday morning I left Smokey's Barbecue in Wellsville. The worker is working about 60, 70 hours per week just to keep our local barbecue joint open. She does not have health care insurance. We have let Medicaid expansion become such a political hot button that the debate, as the previous speaker has noted, is hurting the people in my district. I don't like Medicaid expansion. I don't like government providing options, but our private options are not working right now. I hope we have a discussion. There's another gentleman I could give you an example of. He comes from one of our foster care programs. His dad has been in prison for over 10 years and is going to be released later this year. But he also has not found a way to find insurance, health insurance, dental insurance. The good people in this building, those dirty lobbyists, I'm joking when I say that, but they have found a way to bend over backwards to try to find $2,000 to help pay his dental expenses. He had emergency surgery. He was missing work. He couldn't provide a roof for his younger brother, who's a high school senior. That high school senior has never had a bedroom in his life until this young man dropped out of college, didn't have a vehicle, came home, and put a roof over the kid's head. So with that, body, I do hope we have a health care discussion. It doesn't have to be Medicaid expansion. It doesn't have to be private, but hopefully we can work together and make the dream work. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The chair recognizes Representative Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of SB 238. It has been pointed out that one of the benefits of the certified community behavioral health centers is that we'll be able to adequately train and keep our mental health professionals. The states around us that have preceded us in the development of certified community behavioral health centers hire them away. It appears we do an excellent job of training and educating mental health professionals, only to see them leave the state. So I just want to add a word that we are going to need to address this issue. There are many initiatives that are going to enable us to wonderfully serve those citizens that need mental health assistance of one kind or another. But we're going to need the trained workforce to do that. We, earlier this session, had a bill that was addressed to community colleges and a tax incentive for hiring. That may be one tool, but there are a number of tools in the toolbox to recruit and retain mental health professionals, and we're going to need to explore that very soon. Thank you. I rise in support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The chair recognizes Representative Will Carpenter.
Good morning, colleagues. This bill comes from the Mental Health Modernization Committee. We met all last summer. We spend $570 million a year in Medicaid for mental health in Kansas, and we can't measure it. And this bill I really support because it gives us the metrics and the measurements to measure the savings that we'll get out of this. Plus, it provides better service for our constituents. So I urge your support. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak in regards to Senate Bill 238? Seeing none, Representative Lynn, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I cannot emphasize enough how important SB 238 is to the state of Kansas. According to the most recent SAMHSA report, this program demonstrates that clients have a 62% reduction in hospitalization and emergency department visits. Additionally, the data shows that 15% had an increase in employment or started going to school, and 30% increase in mental health functioning in everyday life. This is proven data-driven legislation, and I urge your support. Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports Senate Bill 238 favorably for passage.
Committee, you've heard the motion by Representative Lynn to report Senate Bill 238 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Majority Leader Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In accordance with House Rule 1903, I move House Bill 2122, appearing under that order of business, general orders, be passed over and retain a place on the calendar.
All right, you heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion passes. The next item of business that we have is Senate Bill 58. For the purpose of carrying Senate Bill 58, the chair recognizes Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were committee amendments. I move adoption of the committee report as amended.
Committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion passes and the committee report is adopted. Representative Owens, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate Bill 58 comes to us from Judiciary, and what it does is it adds a provision to the Kansas Criminal Code that would prohibit the filing of certain liens or claims against real or personal property and provide for criminal penalties as such. We've had a number of judges, especially down in Sedgwick County, that have had liens placed on their houses or other property as a result of judgments they disagreed with. We have a process that is far too easy to accomplish that. So this sets forth some penalties for doing so. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Are there any members that wish to speak to Senate Bill 58? The chair recognizes Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I fear that the carrier of the bill does not fully understand the history or the import of this legislation. So let me take just a moment to go over the bill a little bit more carefully with you. Sometime in the late 70s, early 1980s, literally at the time I started practicing law, there was a trend on the part of folks known as the posse comitatus to file liens, illegitimate liens against public officials. And it wasn't just judges. It was virtually anyone in public office except for the sheriff. The sheriff held a special status. And so the legislature passed a law that made it easier to clear these bogus or phony or harassing liens against people's houses and property. That law seemingly was effective for a time because it provided an expedited procedure by which the liens could be cleared. And literally, we held what was generically referred to or improperly referred to as posse comitatus dockets at the Sedgwick County Courthouse. And we would call all of the cases, and no one would show up, and the judge would extinguish the lien, and that would clear the title to the property. The difficulty with all of that was that while it cleaned up the title, it didn't do anything to deter the bad behavior. And while there was room for those whose titles had been encumbered or wrongfully slandered, slander to title, I think is the old phrase, they could fix the problem, but they couldn't get any compensation for what these folks had done. And that has been the status of the law until more recently. And by the way, by no means was the problem confined to Sedgwick County. The conferees who testified this time around happened to be from Sedgwick County, including Chief Judge Gehring, who was once a member of this chamber, one of our fellow members of the House. But it's a statewide problem, and it's always been a statewide problem. So when confronted with the difficulty that we could clear the lien, but nothing happened to these folks because they were all judgment-proof. I'm sorry, I thought I missed something. Oh, I guess I did. I love a good joke. Jokes are funny. I wish they'd just speak up. Now, at any rate, so this legislation goes one step farther. It attaches a criminal violation to filing a false and fraudulent lien with malicious intent. And it doesn't deal with legitimately contested liens. We're talking about now what the sovereign citizen movement likes to sign. Some of you may recognize them as the Moorish, I can't remember what the phrase is, that's been involved in recent tragedy. So these are not people to be disregarded or handled lightly. So it imposes a criminal penalty. But in addition to that, it improves the prior law as it relates to prohibiting folks who have done this from filing more bogus liens against other people. The current status of the law, as I recall, generally is that if the judge enters a specific order as he or she extinguishes a bogus lien, they can stop you from filing more liens in their county without getting the court's permission. This bill goes one step farther. It says when the court concludes that there has been a bogus lien filed, that the court shall enter an order placing that person under restraint from filing any more liens, not only in the county where the bogus lien was filed, but in any one of the other 105 counties in Kansas. And that's a much more effective way to stop the problem. Now, we don't want to deny these folks an opportunity to file a lien if they in fact have a valid lien. That does occur occasionally. And in that circumstance, they can go back to the judge or the district court who placed them under that restraint and prove that they do have a valid lien, in which case they can file their lien like any other citizen. I apologize for that tedious explanation of the legislation, but I thought it might be beneficial for you to better understand that this is not just a Sedgwick County problem. It is not just a recent problem. It is a statewide, multi-state, endemic problem, and this law won't entirely fix it, but it will give us more tools in the proverbial toolbox to deal with it. For that reason, Mr. Chair, I stand in strong support of Senate Bill 58. Thank you.
Any further discussion on Senate Bill 58? Seeing none, Representative Owens, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you can tell, some of us respect the time of the body and the work that they do in their calendaring in the morning and doing their homework in preparation for these bills. And honestly, some of us don't need to hear our voice for self-validation. With that in mind, Mr. Chairman, I would move that when the committee rises and reports, it report SB 58 favorably for passage.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion by Representative Owens to report Senate Bill 58 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. The next item of business that we have is Senate Bill 103. And for the purpose of carrying Senate Bill 103, the chair recognizes Representative Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were committee reports. I move the adoption of the committee report.
Committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes and the committee report is adopted. Representative Wheeler, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate Bill 103 would amend the Kansas Power of Attorney Act for the state to state that a power of attorney executed on or before July 1, 2021 would be deemed sufficient if in substantial compliance with the forms set forth by the Judicial Council and would direct that the Judicial Council to develop such form. This particular bill particularly addresses the uniform durable power of attorney portion of the Kansas Power of Attorney Act. A uniform durable power of attorney distinguishes itself from a general power of attorney in that in the event of the principal or the maker or giver of the power of attorney becomes for some reason incapacitated, the authority of the power of attorney continues on. With a general power of attorney, that is not the case. This bill is intended to address entities who improperly refuse to accept durable power of attorneys. This bill would prohibit third parties from requiring additional power of attorney forms or other authority granted in power of attorney and would prevent them from requiring that if the form of our power of attorney meets that of the Judicial Council. This bill provides that third parties may rely upon our general durable power of attorneys if they are executed and acknowledged pursuant through the Uniform Law on Notarial Acts. In short, what that means is that if the maker or giver or principal of a power of attorney signs that power of attorney before an authorized notary public, then it is deemed to be sufficient. There are 7 reasons in this bill given why a third party can deny a power of attorney. It's really wandering into the weeds to explain all 7 of those. If there are questions on them, I certainly will answer. But let me just say that what this does provide is that the third party, if recognizing that there is a possible abuse, neglect, or exploitation of the principle of the power of the maker of the power of attorney, they are under obligation to refuse and to report that. With that, Mr. Chair, I stand for questions.
Further discussion on Senate Bill 103. The chair recognizes Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate my senior colleague from Finney County's excellent explanation of this legislation, but so as not to be consumed with the sound of my own voice, nor to be flat, plodding, slow, banal, vapid, insipid, bland, lackluster, prosaic, run-of-the-mill, pedestrian, jejune, leading, heavy, long drawn out, overlong, long-winded, laborious, ponderous, endless, interminable, mechanical, or routine, but never, what was that word again? Never tedious. I urge your affirmative vote on Senate Bill 103. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The chair recognizes Representative Hubert. Representative Hubert, did you not want to speak to the bill? All right, seeing no further discussion, Representative Wheeler, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In short, Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports Senate Bill 103 favorable for passage.
Committee, you've heard the motion by Representative Wheeler to report Senate Bill 103 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. The next item of business and the final item of business that we have today is Senate Bill 37. And for the purposes of carrying Senate Bill 37, the chair recognizes Representative Berquist.
Good afternoon, body. Senate Bill 37 updates producer licensing statutes pertaining to appointment, examinations, fees, license renewal dates, continuing education, suspension, revocation, and denial of licensure and reinstatement. The Senate presented this bill as an answer to the bill that we worked, HB 2074, and HB 2074 passed out of this body at 123 to nothing, and they made some good changes. Those changes included modifying the definition, change the time of a licensure whose licensure was revoked is prohibited from reapplying for a license from 5 years to 2 years. And in conjunction with that, removed language allowing for the commissioner's discretion to prescribe the waiting time for reapplication for a licensee whose license has been denied or revoked. So that takes that latitude away, but it reduces it to 2 years instead of 5. More importantly, in item 3, it exempts a licensed agent who is a member of the National Guard or any reserve component of the armed services of the United States who serves active duty of at least 90 consecutive days from continuing education requirements during that time of active duty, and to grant an extension to such licensed insurance agents for completion of continuing education. And the last change is to require a pre-need only type agent to provide certification at the time of filing a report at the biennial date due that no other insurance business was conducted by that agent during the period covered by that report. The proponents were the same as they were in the previous 2074, the Kansas Insurance Department, Association of Insurance Agents, the Kansas Advisors XL, IMA Financial Group, American Council for Life Insurers, Kansas Association of Professional Insurance Agents, Kansas Chamber, National Association of Insurance Financial Advisors, Kansas, and State Farm insurance companies. There's the same fiscal note applies. The reduction in the amount of licensures applied, and those fees will reduce the revenue loss will be $5,257,680, and there were no amendments. My apologies, Mr. Chair. There were no amendments, and I stand for questions.
All right, discussion on Senate Bill 37. The chair recognizes Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The carrier of the bill did an excellent job of describing what is in this bill. Again, this bill was passed in this House 123 to nothing on February the 11th. The additions by the Senate were good additions, and I'm happy to see this because there's a part of this that we've worked on for several years, and that is continuing education of insurance agents. And like with all professionals, we can always learn a little bit more about our profession and stay up to date. So I encourage your support of Senate Bill 37. Thank you very much.
Any further discussion on Senate Bill 37? Seeing none, Representative Berquist, you may close.
Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it report SB 37 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Berquist to report Senate Bill 37 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Motion passes. This concludes our general orders. The chair recognizes the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we rise and report.
When you've heard the motion to rise and report, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
The clerk will read the committee report.
Mr. Speaker, your committee of the whole recommends Senate Bill 37 be passed. House Bill 2150 and Senate Bills 107, 175, substitute for Senate Bill 238, 58, and 103 be passed as amended. House Bill 2122 be passed over and retain a place on the calendar.
Speaker recognizes Representative Waymaster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the adoption of the committee of the whole report.
You've heard the motion to adopt the committee report. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the committee report is adopted. Reports of standing committees, the clerk will read.
Committee on Agriculture recommends Senate Bill 143 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Insurance and Pensions recommends Senate Bill 78 be amended by substituting a new bill to be designated as House substitute for Senate Bill number 78 as follows: an act concerning insurance relating to the regulation of the business thereof, reinsurance at risk, updating the National Association of Insurance Commissioners credit for reinsurance model law, Insurance Company Holding Act, codifying the National Association of Insurance Commissioners credit for reinsurance model regulation, updating certain definitions relating to service contracts and surplus lines insurance, and the substitute bill be passed. Committee on Insurance and Pensions recommends House Bill 2380 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Local Government recommends House Bill 2176 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Judiciary recommends Senate Bill 56 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Local Government recommends Senate Bill 52 be passed. Committee on Local Government recommends Senate Bill 53 be passed. Committee on Judiciary recommends Senate Bill 106 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Judiciary recommends House Bill 2366 be passed.
Introductions of original motions and House resolutions, the clerk will read.
House Resolution Number 6014 by Representatives Mason, Anderson, and others, a resolution strengthening the sister state ties between the state of Kansas and Taiwan, supporting the signing of a bilateral trade agreement between Taiwan and the United States, and reaffirming support for increasing Taiwan's international participation.
We are waiting on a few things to come upstairs to be read in. But for now, we'll go to announcements. Representative Ballard will replace Representative Victors on the House Transportation and Public Safety Budget Committee today, March 24th. Representative Hoffman will replace Representative Howard on the Ag Natural Resource Budget on Thursday, March 24th. Representative Stephen Owens will replace Representative Kyle Hoffman on Commerce and Labor on Thursday, March 24th. Representative Arnberger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Body, I put on your desk some passport and site books for the Santa Fe Trail. I just hope that you all have a chance to come out and visit all of the monuments we have in central Kansas. And I also have some extra books if you want to give them to your kiddos, so each one can have their own and they can get them stamped. Thanks.
Representative Patton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Judiciary will be meeting today, but our hearing on House Bill 2447 is being canceled. So we'll meet to work bills, but we'll not have a bill hearing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Body, we have prayer caucus after this in room 142 South. Room 142 South. Everybody's welcome. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Democrats, we will have agenda tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. again on Zoom. Again, 8:30 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Kelly.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. For the Financial Institutions and Rural Development Committee, right now we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning, 8:30 in our regular room 218. But watch your email on this one, and we'll see. But right now, I'd like to schedule it for tomorrow morning, 8:30.
Representative Hubert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Education, we're meeting promptly at 1:30. We have a full agenda.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And for Democrats, we will have Thursday Summit tomorrow, and our guest speaker is Secretary of Transportation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Johnson County delegation, sadly, our meeting today is canceled. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Bobson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm over here, back here. To all the former gallery caucus members, we sure miss you up here. South Central delegation, we have a meeting today. Our luncheon is still going on. We do have the Secretary of State, Scott Schwab, is our speaker, as well as the State Treasurer, Lynn Rogers. So right after the meeting, please log on. I sent out the link, and hope to see you there. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Poskin. Representative Hawkins.
Thank Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Body, there's a legislative prayer breakfast tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. in room 142 South.
Like I mentioned earlier, we're waiting on a few things to come up from downstairs. It's the body of BDs. We'd like to return to introduction of bills. Not seeing objection. We will return to introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions. The clerk will read.
House Bill number 2451 by the Committee on Taxation, an act concerning tobacco products relating to the sale thereof, remitting certain payments from tobacco product manufacturers to the credit of the Kansas Endowment for Youth Fund rather than deposit into escrow upon certification by the Attorney General.
Reports of standing committees. The clerk will read.
Committee on Federal and State Affairs recommends House Bill 2417 be passed. Committee on Federal and State Affairs recommends House Bill 2025 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Agriculture recommends Senate Bill 160 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Agriculture recommends Senate Bill 38 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Agriculture recommends Senate Bill 89 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Agriculture recommends Senate Bill 142 be amended. The bill be passed as amended.
The Speaker recognizes Majority Leader for motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Republicans, we will have calendar tomorrow morning at 8:30 via WebEx. Mr. Speaker, I move the House adjourn until Thursday, March 25th at 11 a.m.
For the motion, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. We are adjourned.